what you see in the community?
Sure. Certainly when right around March 16th, we really pivoted, stopped a lot of the programs that we were in the process of developing, getting ready to roll out, and needed to halt everything and really started focusing on changing our communications and making sure that we were getting the information out as quickly as possible, because in that first week things changed so quickly. The governor had new executive orders coming out each day and wanting to ensure that all of our businesses were adhering to those executive orders, and then trying to figure out how we support them as slowly businesses were required to either work from home or close completely. And we were asked to serve, so I'll let Sarah maybe talk a little more about this part of it, but we were asked to serve on the Mayor's Small Business Recovery Working Group. And so that has really been a lot of where we've been focusing about really trying to understand what the needs are of our businesses, how to advocate for them, how to advocate also for our property owners who are certainly challenged, as most of our commercial tenants are unable to be paying rent in these in this month and probably subsequent months. We also changed our focus a little bit with our clean team. So as Tracy was saying, we have a clean team that operates 7 days a week in downtown, and with the less people being in downtown, we actually really needed to move them to more of a security focus. As businesses are closed, the owners aren't in their businesses, they're worried about what that means for them. And so our clean team is focused on security. We've done lighting surveys in downtown, working with the city to ensure that all of the lights are on in downtown. And so we've also shifted to a little bit of a security focus. So communicating the state closures, communicating the small business programs, resources, financial relief programs, that was really in the first 2 weeks sort of our top priority. But Sarah, do you want to talk a little bit about the Support Small Albany and the work group? You don't want to?
Sure. Yeah, the mayor had called immediately for a group to start looking at the economic pieces of the COVID-19 impact. As everyone really should be and should have been, the public health implications were first and foremost to be able to work through. But we know and knew from those early days in March that this is going to be a very complicated issue to tackle. This is not going to be a short-term quick solution by any means. And so the mayor had called for Capitalize Albany to convene a group of the organizations working across economic development throughout Albany. And so that meant our local players, like the Business Improvement District. It meant the county, our regional players like the Chamber of Commerce, but also very targeted business development groups and economic development groups. Really, first and foremost, I think I see Kate Baker here from UAlbany's Small Business Development Center. Folks that really know these programs, live and breathe this, are part of the community every day, but would have access to different information, have access to different stakeholders to be able to just get everybody on the same page. What we were hearing in those early days was a lot of confusion and a lot of panic because things were changing so quickly, like Georgette said. There were a million different sources of information to keep track of, and folks like us, who that's our job to do all the time, we're having a hard time keeping up with it. So having a group convened like Support Small Albany, where we could all jump on Zoom in those early days and weeks, a couple of times a week, to just be able to share with each other what we were hearing at our different levels of government. We had representatives from the assembly members' offices, representatives from our federal representation as well, being able to sort of go through what the latest news was, parse through the details and the shifts, and then also be able to target some of the misinformation that was out early as well, so that we could then go back to our respective channels and get that communication sort of straight and out there and very clean and easy. That led us also to very quickly develop the Support Small Albany website as a tool for small businesses who were really focused on, what do they do with their employees, with their inventory with their businesses moving forward. They had a lot on their plate and continue to be able to have one solid place where they know that they can get all of the most up-to-date information. They can find all of the resources that are available to them in as organized a manner so that they don't have to chase down that information in a million different places. We were able to pull that together with the Support Small Albany Coalition's help funneling information to that, the Central Biz help in setting up the website, and be able to have that resource available to the community early on, so that we could then sort of shift our focus to recovery efforts and stabilization efforts moving forward.
Awesome. I think that's awesome. I've checked out the Small Albany website, and I was on it for a while last night, and it really is, it's an incredible resource. The information on there is super pertinent and accessible, which is awesome. And I guess I do have a question in terms of like what, you know, recovery will look like, what people are thinking in terms of how the bounce back may roll out. There's so many awesome resources right now in terms of Feed Albany and things like that. Like, what do we think sort of resources will be for the recovery process and for the sort of reemergence for folks?
One of the first things that we had heard from our businesses was their top priority was their employees. You know, they were really concerned about how particularly restaurant and retail employees would be able to survive. And like you said, out of that came the Feed Albany program. Ourselves, the mayor, worked on developing some temporary job listings that we were sending out to the restaurant owners to pass on to their employees. I know the mayor has been sending that out in her, I think, their weekly updates on COVID-19, and she has that as a resource as well. And so really wanting to make sure that people were given the opportunity to find temporary employment during this time. We also, we've heard from a lot of our businesses that that the unemployment, well, I know some people are having some frustration trying to get connected, that the unemployment seems to really be working, and then the additional federal money is really helping bridge that gap for a lot of the employees and small businesses that, you know, have been furloughed for the time being. So that seems to have put a lot of removed a lot of stress, I think, for a lot of the employees, employers that had to lay off their employees. So now they're really struggling to figure out, how do I cover expenses with no income coming in, right? And so those, you know, and then trying to really understand, I think the small business development group has done a really good job with their workshops and the recording of their workshops, or, you know, counseling our businesses to really help them understand and try to navigate the different programs and how that really makes sense. Because I think a lot of the businesses are feeling overwhelmed, you know, every day with new information coming out. And then, you know, some of it feels like some programs are good for certain businesses and some programs don't really work. And so how do you understand which is the best for you? You know, a lot of our businesses are negotiating with their property owners on, you know, the rent and maybe, you know, longer term leases, or how do they roll that in later in. But I think there's also, they're expressing some significant concern about once things do reopen, it most likely won't reopen at 100%, right? So what does that look like? And is, you know, if you're, I know I'm focusing a lot on restaurants, but that is a big part of, for us, for downtown. I know Sarah will have a different perspective because she does citywide. But, you know, a lot of them are saying, hey, if I am at 60% of business that I had been at before this starts, I'll be lucky, right? Like that's like a good number. They think that's even aggressive, right? The concern about how when you reopen, our businesses, our restaurants going to need to have 50% less tables because people are not going to feel as comfortable. Like, what is that consumer confidence, I guess, when we go back? And how willing are people going to be sitting in close proximity, or some of our music venues. Are you going to want to be 3 deep at a bar, at a music concert, right, indoors? And so really also looking at that. So they're not only just concerned about how do I pay, rent and insurance when I have no money coming in, but then what does that look like on the other end? Because most likely I will not be, I think all of our downtowns have been on this incredible trajectory, and that's really just been halted. And so trying to help people understand and navigate that, and then figure out where there's holes in gaps. I don't mean holes. Holes sounds a little more aggressive than what I mean. Gaps in the funding sources from the federal and the state. And those are some of the conversations that we're having at that small business recovery group. So what does that look like? And then how can we provide assistance? One of the things we just found out was that only 10% of my businesses can do online gift certificates. That's a huge gap. So 16 out of my 160 restaurant, retail, and retail related offer online gift certificates. So that's a source of income that might be missing. Is there ways for us to jump in and bridge that gap for them? So that's one of the things that we're talking about. But sorry, I'll turn it over to Sarah, because Sarah has probably a larger, broader perspective than I do.
Yeah, I think it's consistent, and Georgette and I have done a lot of talking about this through this Support Small Albany group, but also offline, and trying to negotiate how do we develop programs to come out through this. And, Georgette talked about consumer confidence and when this will happen. As we're looking nationwide at best practices for resources that we can create, we're also looking at industry trends for what people are projecting moving forward in terms of what a recovery process would look like. And one of the things that that trade groups are cautioning nationally is that most people are thinking about this as, we're going to be in this for 3 weeks, 3 months, and then we'll reopen and we'll deal with the reopening then. The reality is that we should be thinking 3 quarters and beyond, because there are going to be consumer confidence issues. We had Jill Delaney from Discover Albany talking about their industry looking at, again, consumer confidence in terms of rebookings, and that looking like the very end of August is when people are starting to feel like they can rebook their travel. And so there are caveats to that, is that because people are hopeful that school's going to start back up and they can get in a last minute summer vacation, or is that really when things will start to progress back to normal? But it's really difficult to predict, and I think that's the bottom line in all of this, is that this is really unprecedented. Things do change every day, and there aren't a lot of very concrete answers out there right now. So as we look to how to build resources for that, what we're really focused on is pointing to those existing federal resources that have a lot more financial capacity to be able to deal with business continuity at this time, and then start to focus on those adaptation, recovery, and reopening programs that, like Georgette said, can sort of fill in the gaps and be able to help businesses project how they'll stand themselves back up after this.
I guess I kind of have a question in terms of that, and it's sort of along the lines of looking forward and anticipating the needs of this. And it sounds like there's a ton of collaboration going on between the different entities, both community organizations, government organizations, and other groups. So can you kind of speak to that a little bit? How is the communication going? How are the collaborations happening? What sort of are the needs and the gaps there, or what's working successfully?
Sure. I think we're seeing that is the silver lining in all of this, is that everybody is working very closely together to ensure that we're not, duplicating efforts, that we're acting efficiently and being able to move forward. We're seeing that on the private side as well. Feed Albany was brought up as a really great local example of different businesses pulling together and finding a way to create solutions for the community. We're seeing that through our research as well, that we're going to see businesses coming out of this that have established new partnerships, new shared resources, shared tools, shared inventory to be able to move forward. So there are going to be those sort of longstanding collaborations that were built from this environment out of necessity that will sort of trigger new innovation whether it is, doesn't really matter which sector, it's going to be across the restaurant sector, but also our retailers and other small service providers as well. We know that there are going to be changes, and some of them are going to be really interesting and good changes coming out of this. I think that's also the case on the public and quasi-public side, where we are, because we know we have to stretch our resources to be able to deal with this. This is not your typical disaster environment where we can look at a natural disaster that is discrete in time. We know what the impacts are going to be. They're going to be capital costs that need a capital solution. These are ongoing operational issues that don't have a set timeline. We don't know sort of where the end is. So we all know that while we have limited resources, we're going to need to get them out there. So sort of what is everybody's niche? We have the BIDs doing a really great job. Tracy opened up with it there, a sort of marketing genius on this. And so each of the BIDs have been doing a really phenomenal job in promoting their businesses that are open through this, making sure that the word is out about specials that are happening. We've got the Small Business Development Center, as Georgette pointed out, hosting dozens of webinars to be able to walk people through their programs and shifting their focus as folks have gone through those SBA programs, PVP, EIDL, all of that sort of alphabet soup of those great resources at the federal level, being able to look at interim solutions that are going to be sort of creative stopgap measures between now and the reopening, and able to sort of communicate that with us so that we're not duplicating that effort and can shift and focus on other matters. It's also allowing us to create resources and then pool funding as well. So if we're looking at business recovery programs in one area, we might be able to use other resources that those different agencies may have. One of the first sort of local financial tools that is coming out of this through Support Small Albany was through the Community Loan Fund of the Capital Region. And Linda McFarland's been doing a great job going around to local lenders and other groups looking to create a grant pool to help be a supplement to some of those federal resources that are out there now. And we're looking at ways, we hope, with upcoming legislation to be able to kick into that and then create other groups around. So it's helping us come up with collaborative ways to stretch a dollar, but also to stretch our staffing resources. And that's something too, at Capitalize Albany, we've recently doubled staff in looking at some of the real estate development projects that we still have on the docket, but because we've been able to sort of deepen our bench, we have additional people that are available to help walk small businesses through the resources that are available, point them in the direction of the information that's out there. And we've been able to also pivot that to help other organizations get the word out as well. So those collaborations have been really critical here because, again, it's no one of our local organizations has the ability to do this and fix it on our own. Those collaborations are really, really critical to develop concrete relationships moving forward.
I think too, one of the needs is also to be flexible, right? Because opening a month from now, what people will need is different than if it's 2 or 3 months from now. And so, we don't really know what that will be. And so while we're talking, Sarah and I are both talking to our boards about different opportunities to maybe take money that had been originally for one project that now doesn't make sense to move forward with. I think we're still trying to really understand those needs and wait, right? Like, so what's going to happen? Because if you listen to the president, he's saying one timeline. If you listen to our governor, they're saying another. And so really trying to, we're developing ideas and looking at best practices across the country, but then needing to sit in it a minute and see what this timeline really looks like. And then I think we talked a little bit, but like, what then is the new business model moving forward? And are there changes that people are going to need to make to their businesses, and what are the costs associated with that? And so are there some needs for programmatic money for those. So I think we're really, I don't know, I feel like it's a lot of, we need this hurry up and also wait, if that makes sense. And so that's why I find this small business recovery working group really helpful, because it is people sort of across the capital region. And then there's also a survey that they've done and going back and doing another round to hear from small businesses. So all businesses, not just restaurant or retail, to really understand what has been the economic impact to your business, what things do you need us to continue to advocate for at the state and federal level. I did see, I know Tom and Kate were talking a little bit about the PPP program, and that it does seem like that money is actually flowing. Several of our businesses have received it, but the concern on how long it's going to take to get the idle money, and then also that money will quickly run out. I know the president did say that they are really pushing that through. It seemed like small business support has been bipartisan support, and so our hope is that additional money will be awarded shortly. We are in the process of finalizing a support letter coming from our small business recovery group to our federal representatives, requesting that they prioritize additional funding for small businesses. But so we're trying to partner together to understand not just the city of Albany, but the capital regions, what the true economic impact is and what the needs are, and then figuring out where we can move quickly and pivot into those priorities.
I think bringing it up a level too in terms of collaboration, it's really exciting to hear this week from the governor's press conference with the surrounding governors, the collaboration that the states are having on that front, and that economic recovery is a core component of that collaboration. And so we expect that out of that, there will be a lot of guidance on financial recovery programs at the local level to be able to help us sort of buy into to state direction on that will be comparable and pooled among those different states. So that will help us be able to better target our resources. We're hoping that it will also, in addition to the federal funding, be guiding some of the state resources toward this effort. So again, as we sort of hurry up and wait, as we're sort of seeing what the outcomes are, we're able to leverage those deeper pools of funding to target programs here locally and put them to use on the ground how they're needed here. And so that's, whether that's from the proposal to use Industrial Development Agency funding in ways that it's never been able to be used before, or if it's looking at federal funding through HUD and CDBG and how to program that out. Those are all different resources that we're looking at now, and we're collaborating with our partners to understand, that pool of resources that's out there. We're putting together program guidelines now that, to Georgette's point, we know that we're going to need to be flexible on based on when those sort of higher collaborations come out with guidance. We can hit the ground running immediately and be able to put programs to work.
Awesome. And quickly, I saw Assemblyman John McDonald commented. If you have anything to add, we'd love to hear it.
Sure. And John, are you there?
Yeah, he's at the bottom. He needs to unmute. John, you gotta unmute.
I'm unmuted. How are you?
Hey, John.
How's everybody? Good. Hey, I'm actually got to jump on the phone with SUNY for a couple minutes, but this is great. It's good to see the ideas bouncing around. I just shared some information about, the IDAs have been prohibited in the past from really focusing on developing programs, loan programs, and the sad part is the IDAs are closest to the business community, so it can really be impactful. So we are pushing pretty much daily. Ryan Silva and myself are in communication with the executive's office. We have legislation we're drafting. The problem is we don't know when we're going to meet again. So that's part of the challenge. So I don't like to always bank on legislation, being a legislator, believe it or not. It's good stuff though. And, I think, Georgette, you were mentioning some programs, particularly for the restaurant community. It's going to change, and they're going to need some technical guidance on, doing these little changes within their place, and whether it's the professionals helping guide them or actually support for the materials. Those are the type of programs that can be very meaningful, but more importantly, get people thinking. Granted, it might be a couple months, but now's the best time to start reorganizing. And by the way, tomorrow, Pat and I are doing with Andrew Kennedy and Kate Baker from SUNY a small business forum as well. It's on Zoom. It's all over our Facebook. So feel free to jump in if you can. And I'll stop from there. Unless anybody has any questions.
Thank you.
John, do you think we'll see an executive order soon on the IDA funds?
Well, we've been thinking we would see it for a week or two, but in all fairness, one thing about this governor, he's very much 5 to 10 steps ahead. I'm sure his team has a time and a place on when they're going to issue that. I do think we're going to see it. It makes perfect sense. I've talked to a lot of people at the higher levels of DOB. Had to convince them that this is money that the IDAs can help support local business, not money that the state can take from the IDAs.
Thank you.
Because there was, what do you mean you got $100 million out there? I said, no, it's not your money. It's money that the community, it's the money that the community, the IDAs have earned. And it's up to them to determine what best fits their community. But I like to think it's sooner rather than later. You know, the whole collaboration going on with the other governors is strategic, as always. And I think it's only a matter of maybe a week, but we'll see.
Good news, John. Thank you.
Yep. I'm going to mute myself. I got to go on to another call, but I'll be watching.
Okay. Do we have any questions or comments from others?
Hi, this is Layla. I have a question / comment. I know John just said he had to make a call. Maybe someone from Pat Fahey's office is on. I don't know. I'm curious to know what movement there is in the Assembly or the Senate. I'm not sure if there's a parallel bill in the Senate about the bill introduced by Assemblymember Carroll to require insurance companies to provide coverage under the business interruption insurance, notwithstanding the exclusion written into those policies for pandemics.
Yeah, I don't think they're on the call. It is
I'm
something
back.
that we, oh, John, sorry.
I'm back. That bill's been circulating. It's getting some discussion. I know I've talked to Senator Breslin, who's chair of the insurance committee in the Senate side. I don't know if there's a companion bill in the Senate yet, to be honest with you. I don't know. I don't know from a timeliness perspective how quick something like that will happen. A lot of times the challenge, and I'm very sympathetic to what we're talking about. I'm a small business owner too. But usually the question is, was this potential pandemic considered when they were doing their actuarial studying of determining the rates to begin with? And I don't know the answer to that question. I just don't know. So this is one of those challenging things where we're trying to institute a policy after the fact that the premiums have been paid over the past X amount of years. I know it's year by year for most of us, but things look at the totality. But I can tell you it's gotten a lot of attention from many of us members in the Assembly because we understand the challenge. And now I'm going to jump off, unless you got something to say.
Okay.
Michael Tucker, did I see you raise your hand?
I was waving goodbye to John, but it's good to see you all here.
Michael?
This is really valuable perspective on this. I think, you know, up till now, I've been so immersed in it for not-for-profits and other clients, including Columbia County, that, you know, to be able to, you know, take a half an hour, an hour and think beyond and think of the realities of you know, ramping back up, whether it's 25, 50, 75 in the office context, but some of the things that you mentioned about restaurants and public gatherings and people's fears are really do put this out 18 to 24 months. And I don't know who's going to work from an office anymore when we all figured out how to work from home, but it's not as easy for the technology if you don't, get more equipment here. So, but thank you all. This was great.
I think, Michael, it will be interesting to see what the office work environment changes into. It will change, but I think that there's just as many people who now have figured out how to work from home and like it. There's just as many who don't like it. They want to get up, they want to get out of the house, they want to be in a much more social setting, and kind of go back to the way, things were. But there'll be an impact on co-working spaces.
Yeah.
I don't know, Tom, if you have any thoughts on that. I can kind of go back and forth on what I see. I think there's going to be a need for more community space, actually. As more people do work from home, they have the opportunity to, gather at a certain location on a periodic basis. Or have the option to work from a co-working space as well.
Yes, that's what we're seeing on it from an industry level too, is that the longer that this goes on, people are getting more and more efficient with working remotely, and the hardware and software solutions people are figuring out. But on the culture side, that has been a struggle of maintaining office culture and communications and, just that sense of team throughout this. And so the early predictions of the swing completely away from, everybody's going to ditch their commercial office space entirely. People were sort of spouting that early. That has quieted down a little bit, and people are sort of Tom, I liked your note about they're sick of teaching their kids from home, and there's that about being able to be around grown-ups who are like-minded and working toward a common goal all day.
Yeah.
Look, I was never good at fractions. I'm even worse at it now. I can teach the alphabet, but I figured out that I'm a better guest reader than I am an elementary school teacher. So my role is to come in and just read here and there. But so Michael, I think we're obviously paying close attention to anything that's coming out nationally. Everything is remains to be seen, right? So who knows how long does this go on and what does life look like? But I do think that there's after this there's an acceleration of this flexible work environment, and whether it's straight up co-working or if it's people saying, look, one of the challenges we have, and a lot of people have, a lot of restaurants too, is, we have commercial landlords, and, look, we still have to pay our rent. So, we're dealing with our landlord. We're trying to work with them on a deferment. We're also looking at some of the federal programs that help, pay towards the rent. But it gives you a pause to say, geez, I got to pay, I'm paying $15,000 a month in rent here. So, there will be an appeal, I think, after this to say, look, there's an opportunity to have more flexible more flexible office product out there. And whether it's just straight up, how the business and how the real estate business gets changed, where people don't want to lock in for 5-10 years. So I definitely think that's something we'll see. But the social side of this, and this is a great experiment. So all you guys being on this call is awesome. Is I miss people, right? I miss, I take for granted all the people I talk to every day. And I think I like to be alone. I like my alone time, but I'm man, I really miss talking to people and seeing people and just interacting with random people. And I think that a lot of people are starting to take account of that as well. Of geez, how many people did I just, in Troy, we call it the Troy 20, right? Downtown Albany, it's the same thing. You run into people on the street and you have that 15-20 minute conversation.
Right.
So I think the social side of it, people coming out of this are going to want to, find their tribes and, find their colleagues again. And, that's what we're hoping for.
Sure, and I think it's a good point to add on to our discussion earlier about the kind of more need for collaboration among different entities and the opportunity that it'll provide now that we recognize we can work together more easily and use these virtual platforms to kind of supplement and enhance our communities and the communities we're in, the offices we're in, the different buildings we're in. I really think it's just going to make for a more integrated workforce and community in general. So.
Hey, I just have a quick question for the panelists. So I'm just curious, we have different friends in different industries, but without, naming names or specific businesses, I mean, could you just give us a feel for in general, like hotels and, I know, the restaurants are hurting, but just some of the projects that are going on downtown, some of these, projects that are, Downtown Albany, was cooking on every cylinder, was firing on every cylinder, right? Like everything was going. And, it just comes to a halt. But what are you just in general hearing from people? Are people feeling like, hey, I'm going to weather this, I'm going to come out on the other side of it? Are you hearing that, look, it took too much of a toll? What's your general vibe from different industries?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. Overall, a lot of the folks on this call are probably sick of hearing me say over the past year, just wait until summer 2020, and downtown Albany is going to, really be incredible. It's been on a growth trajectory for a long time. There's been a ton of activity. I don't want to say it's, it was going to all of a sudden be great, because it's been great for a long time, but wow, we had, hundreds of millions of dollars of construction activity happening, retail leasing going on. And that's not just downtown, citywide. There are and still are projects from the river to the Pine Bush, right? So we have all of this activity that was just bursting at the seams. And this is right in the middle of it, and right when it, would have been starting to open. And so that has been a struggle for us to, as we've sort of flexed our operations, we had talked through the real estate programs that we were looking at enacting. We're talking about sort of celebrating hitting new milestones on downtown residential. We're now looking at how we can best move those projects forward and keep them in a position to be able to move forward as the pause is lifted. We've seen in other disasters that construction is typically something that folks want to get restarted as quickly as possible, because it's putting people back to work, it's getting projects back on track, it's funding that you can spend and see a concrete result, no pun intended, result at the end of the day. So we're trying to make sure that all of these projects that have been in the pipeline, whether it's through the Downtown Revitalization Initiative in Clinton Square, everything happening up and down Pearl Street, or again, citywide, that they're able to open back up efficiently. And so we have been reaching out to all of the projects individually to talk through what their plans are, to also navigate the process of what is essential versus not essential. And there was a lot of change in guidance that came out throughout that. And, by and large, from the development community, the response has been, public safety first and public health first, which has been really great to hear. That, they don't want to do anything that compromises public health. But in cases where the projects are essential, or where a site needed to continue to be safe, right? If they were connected to an adjacent building and they didn't have fire alarms installed, they needed to get fire alarms installed to be able to move forward, that those projects could keep moving. We have not yet sort of heard that, there are permanent stoppages that are imminent on this. So far, everybody's been sort of rolling with the pause and figuring out how to best move forward. But I think the biggest concern that we're hearing from the project side of things is actually on the supply chain and the small contractors after the fact. Once everything starts opening up and people are starting to order materials again, they're trying to get subcontractors back on site. Everyone's going to be doing that all at once. And so how do we sort of plan for that and pace for that moving forward? But those are the big concerns that we're hearing right now, not necessarily this has ruined everything. It hasn't. It's just paused everything. And how do we come back from it efficiently?
Yeah, we had actually just released an RFP to do a updated demographic study of downtown, because really downtown 3, 5, 7, 10 years, over the past 10 years has changed so significantly. And that was really going to be the focus of our annual meeting, talking about the impact of residential, who's living down here. A lot of people don't fully believe that all the apartments are having 97% occupancy. And who are those people? And so how do we tell that story and their economic impact, their buying their spending habits, and what does that look like. We have had our office vacancy rate had just had a huge drop at the last CBRE announcement, the market report that they had done. And then also with the, I know with your expansion, Tom, and as well as, 69 State being purchased for co-working space, really trying to understand what that new landscape looked like and what how that was changing things, having more people in a, condensed area, and then what that buying spending power was, and using that to attract new offices, to attract new retailers. And so they were actually supposed to be due the third week in March. And so we've put that on hold, right? But that really was our story we were going to tell, and use that as a marketing tool to attract new businesses. So what we are hearing, at least from our residential properties, is that for the majority of them, they aren't seeing people who can't pay rent. They may have had one or two that are asking for, the ability to pay late, but that they are pretty steady. The types of businesses, the types of incomes that the residents have, the jobs that they have remained pretty steady. So we're not seeing a huge impact from that, but certainly for property owners, most of the commercial properties aren't able to pay. And then I think what we're in downtown, I think downtown's a little different than some of the rest of the city, right? I was talking with Anthony Capice, who runs the Central Ave Business Improvement District, and he said he has seen, just driving, where restaurants have just closed up shop. All of their stuff is sitting on the curb for garbage pickup, and they've just closed, right? They're done. And he's seen a handful of those happening in the last couple of weeks as rent has become due. I think what we're seeing is people, again, can sort of weather the short term, but if it goes longer, I think those conversations change. And we're seeing some people that had been thinking about maybe retiring, maybe there wasn't a family succession plan for family members to take over the business, that they are choosing and really seriously considering about just closing now instead of a year or two from now when they were originally planning on retiring. I think it's just a very small handful. And then I think our real concern is that people who just recently opened and have lots of loans to open, to then have to take additional loans to survive and weather this, that those loans may be too much. And so we're not sure what that impact will be for those folks. I mean, we've only heard a handful of small office buildings, small offices closing. We've heard, from some of the larger businesses that maybe they're asking for some rent, stretching the rent payments over, but we haven't heard of a lot of office tenants really that are looking to close right now.
Yeah, I see Dominic Pernomo's on here too. DP, do you have a minute? Could you just talk? And we're seeing some of the stuff you're doing, which is amazing, and Feed Albany, and you've been through some tough decision making the last month or so. Could you just give us a couple minutes on what you're up to, what you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, the Feed Albany initiative has been incredible to see the amount of support that we've gotten from. I think we're running 5-6 different restaurants right now. We're using kitchens. I think our GoFundMe is up to about $35,000. We've gotten a wonderful grant from Capitalize Albany. Thank you very much, Sarah. We have other funds that should be coming on board that we'll be excited to announce hopefully in the next week. We're feeding about 7,000 meals right now a week that we're putting out, which has been huge. A lot of community volunteers coming in to help pack the meals. Lots of restaurant employees who are looking, looking to contribute in some way. So it's been a tremendous amount of support that we've gotten. Local media has been all over it and has been really helping us spread the word. We're not only feeding restaurant employees, we're feeding pretty much anybody in the community who's in need or at risk. Bringing 400 meals to Albany Med to feed the emergency department. You know, in ICU staff was pretty incredible. We did that at the VA as well, and we hope to get to St. Peter's and Memorial probably within the next 7 to 10 days as well. As far as the business side of things, I'm on the board of the State Restaurant Association. Yesterday, we had a call. Our executive directors from the 7 or 8 states, of which the governor was on the phone call with all those 7 or 8 governors. Those execs had a call about 2 hours later. And I don't want to be doom and gloom, but we're looking at reopening in phases. Phase 1 right now is about a 30% occupancy in restaurants, no bar seating, 10 feet between each table, servers in gloves and masks, guests' temperatures taken at the front door when you come in. Wow. It's going to be some time before there's any sense of normalcy. You know, any sort of event business, you know, if you're having a conference for 30, 40 people, it's going to be a while before we see that. You know, one of the guys who is on our board as well, he's down in Elmont, you know, and obviously Belmont, they don't sign either. You know, you know, I have this recurring dream that, you know, like it's May 11th and everything's back to normal. But the reality of it is it's going to be a process for sure, you know. You know, there's obviously still a lot of funding and a lot of programs and a lot of grants and everything like that, which is great. You know, but those are getting us to the next 8 weeks, you know, what we need to get to the next 8 months, 12 months. So, you know, as far as sort of everything kind of getting back to normal, you know, it's certainly gonna be a process. And what does the new normal look like? You know, I had a discussion with somebody from Discover Albany. You know, if you're having a meeting for 50 people and you set up a coffee station where people are getting their own coffee and touching the same creamer and, you know, all of those things, it's, you know, everything's going to be like a Starbucks. You're going to have a server who's going to be there preparing the coffee for you, you know, doing that sort of thing. All those little things we took for granted. You know, it's going to, like, again, it's going to be some time before it's, you know, normal. Sorry to be a buzzkill.
I don't think that's a buzzkill. I mean, I think that's a reality that we all need to be talking about more, because again, you know, back to if we're trying to reopen and we're talking about the short term, that's going to end up doing us a disservice by not knowing that this is going to be sort of a phased approach and sort of a slow roll back to, you know, whatever the new normal is. And so being able to start thinking through those, Georgette and I were, you know, going back and forth about this exact point overnight last night on, you know, every time that you sort of target a solution to something, it brings up 3 other issues that you would never, you know, necessarily consider. It seems like it would be common sense, but the businesses that are faring the best on the restaurant and retail side are businesses that were set up for a really seamless online transaction. And frankly, not many businesses are. You know, Georgette had cited before the online gift card issue that's there. And so finding all of those small details that in the interim, in this next, you know, as we're sort of figuring out recovery, lessons learned that we're learning from this first wave of the pandemic that we can start fixing now to be able to address those sort of new normal points and how to get to them. You know, those are the things that we have to be talking about now so that we can address them so that they're fixed moving forward.
Any additional questions, comments?
All right. Well, we've got about 5 minutes left, so speak now or forever hold your peace. But I just want to say thank you so much to Tracy, Sarah, Georgette, and Tom. This has been great. And I really appreciate the input from everyone on here. So thank you for the conversation. Thank you for all the hard work. Thank you for the ability to be flexible and adapt and change and kind of keep your head on a swivel every day. and keep going through it all, especially, you know, Dominic's a great example of make it work, you know, every day, show up, you know, be ready for it. So again, thank you all for participating. Thank you for joining. Stay tuned for our future programming. And again, I can't thank you ladies enough. This has been incredible, and you all are doing some incredible work. So
Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
thanks
you.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.